Good afternoon to our listeners on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, our viewers on the Parliament channel, and those of you joining us via the World Wide Web on the Parliament's website www.ttparliament.org. We are just some 30 seconds away from the start of today's sitting on the House of Representatives. On the agenda today, debate is expected to continue on the Miscellaneous Provisions Marriage Bill 2016. In addition, there's some 12 papers to be laid, 5 urgent questions to be posed, and 3 questions on notice. We take you over now to the chamber as we await the start of today's proceedings.
The Honorable, the Speaker.
We welcome you to the 37th sitting of the House in the second session of the 11th Parliament that takes place on Friday, June 2nd, 2017.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the Creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this House here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, Mr. Rushton Parry, MP, member for Miaro, Mrs. Christine Nualo Hussain, MP, member for Kamuta Mansinala, and Dr. Lakram Bodo, MP, member for Faizabad, have asked to be excused from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions. Papers.
The Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following paper. The audited financial statements of the University of Trinidad and Tobago for the year ended September 30th, 2013. And sorry, Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this paper be referred to the Public Accounts Committee.
Honorable members, the question is that paper 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the administrative report of the Ministry of Tertiary Education and Skills Training for the period October 2014 to 2015.
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to lay in the House the administrative report of the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus for the fiscal year 2014 to 2015. Madam Speaker, I also have the honor to lay the administrative report of the University of Trinidad and Tobago for the period October 2014 to September 2015. Madam Speaker, I also have the honor to lay the administrative report of the National Training Agency for the fiscal year 2013 to 2014. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay on the table the administrative report of the Youth Training and Employment Partnership Program Limited for the fiscal year 2014 to 2015. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the administrative report of the National Institute of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology for the fiscal year 2014 to 2015.
The Minister of National Security. Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the absence of the Minister of National Security, I have the honor to lay the following papers. The administrative report of the Ministry of National Security for the fiscal year 2014 and the annual reports of the operation of the Interception of Communications Act, Chapter 1508, for the years 2013 and 2014. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
The Deputy Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following paper, the annual report of the Integrity Commission for the year 2016.
The Minister of Public Administration and Communications.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following paper, the annual administrative report of the Ministry of Science and Technology for the period October 1st, 2014 to September 30th, 2015.
Reports from committees.
The member for Diego Martin North East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to present the following report. The third interim report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Insurance Bill 2016.
The member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the following report. The fourth report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity for the second session, 11th Parliament in the systems in place to protect children from abuse.
Prime Minister's questions, urgent questions.
The member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Tourism, could the Minister inform this House of the next step in the impasse between the Tourism Development Company, Communication Workers Union and the Ministry of Tourism since the Industrial Court decision?
The Minister of Tourism.
Madam Speaker, I am advised that on the 31st of May, there was a matter in the Industrial Court presided over by Her Honor, Ms. Deborah Thomas Felix, the President of the Court, His Honor, Mr. Albert Aberdeen, Her Honor, Mrs. Kathleen George Marcel, His Honor, Mr. Kirill Jack, and His Honor, Mr. Azim Mohammed. Council appeared on behalf of the Tourism Development Company to attend to the matter, which was to discuss a number of industrial relations offences that had been lodged by the Communications Workers Union in the court. I'm advised that after discussion, it was agreed that the parties would go away and hold further discussions to see whether they can meet and treat with respect to this matter. The matter is therefore ongoing.
Member for Caroni East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Minister of Education, acting. With a statement today by the President of the Principals Association of Special Needs Schools that no schools have so far been paid since the beginning of this academic year 2017, which conflicts with the Minister's statement. It conflicts with the Minister's statement that he said two schools have received payment. Can the Minister give an assurance to this House that he will make a statement to this House, a statement that is at the next sitting clarifying this serious inconsistency?
Minister of Education.
Thank you,
Somebody
Madam
told
Speaker.
the untruth.
Madam Speaker, this matter is engaging the Ministry of Education as we speak. It is a very serious issue, and I am giving the assurance to this House and to the member who posed the question. I'm giving the assurance that the matter is being dealt with. I am also giving the assurance that the Minister will communicate with all stakeholders on this matter as deemed necessary when all the facts are uncovered, by whichever method is deemed necessary at the time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Could all members remember the decorum and please be guided by what is parliamentary language? Member for Shogunas East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Finance, is the Minister aware that for the years 2013 and 2014, the National Insurance Board paid out more money in benefits than it is collecting from contributions, while for the year 2015, there was a small surplus of $45,000?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This question was only made known to me a few minutes ago, and therefore I am not in a position to give precise details, but I can speak generally and indicate that I am aware that there are issues with respect to a projected deficit between contributions, earnings, and payments to beneficiaries. And it is a matter that is addressing the Ministry of Finance.
Member for Princess Down.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, through you to the Honourable Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. In light of the Prime Minister's recent call for the President of the Organization of American States, OAS, to step down, could the Minister indicate whether the government has directed the Trinidad and Tobago representative to the OAS to move a motion calling for member states to agree to have the President of the OAS removed or resign?
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Madam Speaker, the answer is no.
Member for Princess Down.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, to the Honourable Minister, could the Honourable Minister say if it is the intention or has any discussions taken place in the government to follow up with substantive action, since it appears that the Prime Minister's off-the-cuff foreign policy position was made in isolation?
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
No, I cannot say so.
Member for Oropuch East.
On this matter, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Could the Minister indicate precisely what are the concerns of the head of government of this country and the government in relation to the Secretary General of the OAS and statements attributed to him? What is the problem with the OAS head?
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Madam Speaker, I am minded to take it as a compliment, the ability to look into one's head. I think that it would have been articulately expressed when the views of the government of Trinidad and Tobago were made known recently by the Honourable Prime Minister.
These are urgent questions. Only 2 questions, supplementals are allowed. Could we please order, please? Member for Oropuch West.
Madam Speaker, to the Attorney General, in light of recent comments made by the Minister of National Security in relation to mobile scanners to be utilized by Customs and Excise Division, which are in Trinidad but not operational, could the Attorney General state the legal issues and the cause for the delay to resolving same?
Attorney General.
Sure. Thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. I can confirm that the scanners are to be operationalized after the maintenance agreement and the standard operating procedures have been settled. They are at the cusp of being settled. There are direct discussions going on with the local agent, the foreign provider, the Customs, and the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, which will deal with that. I should say that that is a need for caution, which is being exercised in consultation with the unions because of the radiation factor that go along with the scanners. So it's just out of caution to make sure that the maintenance and safety aspects are properly concerned and dealt with.
Member for Oropuch West.
Well, AG, do you have a tentative time frame for this?
Attorney General.
We're hoping, Honourable Member, through you, Madam Speaker, to have that meeting during the course of the next week. and we're looking to deal with it with alacrity. Our estimation is that we wish to put it forward as quickly as possible. Once we sign that maintenance agreement, we'll be in safe order.
Questions on notice? Questions for oral answer?
Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are 3 questions for oral answer. We will be answering all 3. There are no questions for written answer, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 127 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is anticipated that the review of the National Test 2018 will be completed and the report submitted to Cabinet by August 2017. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Oropouche West.
Speaker, question number 128 to the Minister of Finance.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Caroni East, I just would like to ask you to please maintain the decorum, and I advised before for the members sitting at that side, you all interrupt the hearing of the viewers on television. Okay? Thank you. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as we all know, the sustained slowdown in the local energy sector, which is the country's main earner of foreign exchange, has resulted in a consistent decline in the supply of foreign exchange since 2014, while demand remained robust and strong. In fact, Trinidad and Tobago has lost US $2.5 billion annually in forex earnings since 2014. Because demand has remained robust, the domestic foreign exchange market is therefore currently in disequilibrium, as purchases by the authorized dealers are insufficient to meet the customer's demand. By way of illustration, the purchases, sales, and central bank sales of foreign currency for the period 2014 to 2017 are as follows. In 2014, the total purchases of foreign currency from the public by authorized dealers was US $5.5 billion, whereas the sales to the public, $7 billion, causing the central bank to inject the difference into the system. In 2015, Madam Speaker, the purchases of foreign currency from the public, $4.9 billion, whereas the sales to the public, $7.4 billion, causing the central bank in 2015 to inject a record $2.6 billion into the system. In 2016, with the declining trend, the purchases of foreign currency from the public, $4.3 billion, whereas the sales, $5.8 billion, causing the central bank to inject $1.8 billion into the system in 2016. For the period January to April 2016, there was $1.5 billion in purchases from the public and $1.8 billion in sales, causing the central bank to put in just over $400 million. For the corresponding period this year, 2017, January to April, the purchases of foreign currency from the public, $1.1 billion, sales, $1.7, causing the central bank to put in $675 million so far. The central bank continues to closely monitor the market through interactions with dealers and through the implementation of various reporting requirements. The bank intervenes in the foreign exchange market on a regular basis to provide additional liquidity. As I said, providing for the year an additional $675 million so far, a substantial increase from the $430 million for the same period in 2016. Additionally, in 2017, the central bank has introduced mechanisms to provide additional liquidity. One of these facilitates the available supply of US dollar banknotes to the authorized dealers to meet their walk-in customers' demands, while the other allows the dealers to close trading positions which were extended to satisfy client demands. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Caroni East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Minister, the purchase from the public, does that include the energy sector purchase? If so, tell us if there is a differentiation.
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, the word public has one meaning. And therefore, in this case, as in all publics, the public who convert foreign exchange in the commercial banking sector does include the oil and gas companies.
Member for Caroni East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the Honourable Minister indicate in view, in light of the closure of 2 of the fast food outlets recently as publicized, what is the government's intention to deal with a number, subsequent possible closures by other fast food industries as a result of shortage of foreign currency?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a very topical question. In fact, I read the article, and I noticed that one of the restaurants in particular, Madam Speaker, the arrangement between that fast food franchise and the local operator was that they must import foreign food and use foreign foods only in the restaurant. So that whereas I deeply sympathize with the franchise holder, I think it may create a movement towards the use of local food in Trinidad and Tobago.
Member for Oropouche West.
Question number 129 to the Minister of Public Utilities.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission's, or TNTEC's, debt to the National Gas Company, NGC, as at April 30th, 2017, stands at US $458,852,624.45, or the TT equivalent of $3.12 billion. As you may know, members, Madam Speaker, gas is used to produce electricity. This gas is purchased by TNTEC from NGC and supplied to the independent power producers, or IPPs as we call them, to convert it to electricity. The electricity is subsequently purchased by TNTEC from the IPPs and transmitted and distributed to users via the electricity grid. Over the period 2010 to 2016, Madam Speaker, there was an accumulation of arrears to NGC as TNTEC was unable to meet all of its monthly payments due to intermittent cash flow challenges. The breakdown of the outstanding arrears are as follows. 2010, $31,257,002.65. All of these are in US dollars. 2011, $30,262,029.93. 2012, $2,508,020.29. 2013, $10,766,370.11. 2014, $70,162,568.77. 2015, $149,557,677.23. In 2016, $133,272,368.37. And in 2017 to date, $31,056,595.10, with a grand total, as I said, of $458,852,624.45. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Of Caroni East.
Honorable Minister, is there any idea, or could you give this House an idea of how does TNTech intend to repay this to NGC in the short or medium term?
Minister of Public Utilities.
These matters are under active consideration, and I don't want to run the risk of preempting any, but measures are being taken and matters are being duly considered in that regard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd just like to ask the Honourable Minister whether one of these measures being contemplated is an increase in electricity rates.
Public Utilities.
As I said, I think it would be risky, given the nature of affairs in the world and in Trinidad and Tobago, to venture my personal opinion while these matters are being contemplated, Madam Speaker.
Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Minister of Public Utilities, is one of the measures being contemplated the privatization of TNTech?
Public Utilities.
Madam Speaker, the last two answers to supplementals that I rendered are opposite in relation to the last that was put to me by my good colleague, the member for Chaguanas West.
Member for Tabaki.
To the Honourable Minister, Madam Speaker, again, is one of the measures being contemplated is a reduction in the staffing of TNTech and the contracting out of TNTech's work.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam Speaker, the answer that I gave a while ago to three supplementals are again to be applied to the last supplemental. I am not at liberty or am willing at this point, while the matters are being contemplated, to render my personal opinion.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House, and moved by a minister.
Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, having regard to the third interim report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Insurance Bill 2016, I beg to move that the committee be allowed an extension of 4 weeks in order to complete its work and submit a final report by June 30th, 2017. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is, be it resolved that the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Insurance Bill 2016 be allowed an extension of 4 weeks in order to complete its work and submit a final report by June 30th, 2017. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Any against? I think the ayes have it.
Public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Honourable members, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was adjourned on Friday, March 3rd, 2017, will be resumed. A bill entitled, An Act to Amend the Marriage Act, Chapter 4501, the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act, Chapter 4502, the Hindu Marriage Act, Chapter 4503, the Orisha Marriage Act, Chapter 4504, and the Matrimonial Proceedings and Property Act, Chapter 4551. The members of this debate are Honourable Faris Alwari, Mr. Barry Padarath, Honourable Ayana Webster Roy, Mr. Rushjan Parry, Honourable Terence Dial Singh, Dr. Fuad Khan, Honourable Maxi Coffey. Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It is an honor to be able to contribute on this bill, which has been before this House for some time. This act to amend the Marriage Act, Chapter 4501, the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act, Chapter 4502, the Hindu Marriage Act, Chapter 4503, the Orissa Marriage Act, Chapter 4504, and the Matrimonial Proceedings and Property Act 4551. The first thing I'd like to take note of, Madam Speaker, is that this bill really consists of amendments to 5 existing pieces of legislation, so that the bill itself is not a whole bill that comes to us in the sense of drafting a new law, but comes to us in the form of amendments that in the end will create a new legislative framework for the conduct of marriages in Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to take note of the fact as well, Madam Speaker, that in the original bill that came before this House and which was subsequently amended in the Senate, there was a clause which read as follows: "This act shall have effect even though inconsistent with sections 4 and 5 of the Constitution." And that was included because even in the notes that we were given that are usually prepared by Parliament, the parliamentary staff indicated that this act actually violates the rights of individual communities as guaranteed by the Constitution. And the first question that I would ask, Madam Speaker, with your permission on this bill, is why would the Attorney General unilaterally remove such a clause when the reason for it being there, and I will explain and argue the case why in fact it should be included. Why would he remove it when it was an important guarantee in the law and would lead to a consensus decision of the Parliament if we so decided? And why, therefore, has it been removed? Why is it now not included in the bill as amended in the Senate? The bill basically establishes 18 years as the legal age for contracting a marriage. So now, according to the bill, there is no permission from anyone that is required. 18 years is the age of majority, and 2 equal partners of marriage age and of majority age, according to the law, are able to enter into a contract of marriage. So the age 18 is established as the age because it is the age of majority under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. Secondly, it is the same for both males and females. And thirdly, it is one law for all citizens. And I want to say from the outset that I have no problem with these 3 principles. That you establish the age of majority as the age of marriage, age for marriage, in which 2 equal contracting, mutually consenting parties agree to get married. Secondly, that the age is the same for males and females. And thirdly, there is one law for every citizen, regardless of who that citizen might be. So it establishes marriage as a contract by mutual agreement. The parties are bound by the law, and the marriage officer is also bound by the law, and there are strong penalties for violation of the law by the marriage officer. And previous marriages that may have taken place that involve people under the age of 18 will in fact be honored. In other words, there would be no retroactivity or issues created for those who had been married. There is a strange clause here, and I'm sorry the Attorney General is not here, which is which says it is 4, clause 4b, 4h, in which it said in section 28, by deleting the word 6 o'clock in the afternoon and substituting the word 9 o'clock in the evening, so that they facilitate a wedding taking place up to 9 o'clock in the night. Now, I don't know why this was necessary. This is not a big point, Madam Speaker, but I just want to point out, first of all, that, for instance, 20 or 30 years ago, night weddings were normal in the Hindu community. So that it would take place at midnight, 10 o'clock, whatever it was. And the second thing is that I don't see why there is a need to put anything about time in the, maybe the AG can explain, but I don't understand it. But I do want to say that in principle, I have no problem with the legal age of 18. I have no problem with males and females being of the same age. And I have no problem with one law for all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. This bill also makes provision for the voiding of a marriage if the law is broken, and it also accepts all marriages prior to the passing of this law, regardless of the ages at which people got married. And as I indicated before, there are strong penalties for breaking the law. None of these things that I've mentioned in the bill do I have any problem with, Madam Speaker. I think they are reasonable propositions, but I would suggest some other things with which I might have problems or wish to raise issues. Now, marriage can be an emotional but simple matter, but it can also be a very complex issue. In today's world, the world in which we live, you have male-female marriages. You have male-male marriages. Maybe not in Trinidad and Tobago, but it exists in the world. You have female-female marriages. And you have transgender realities, which are part of and parcel of the reality of the world in which we live today. I want to say from the outset that this bill deals with none of these things. It simply deals with the amendment of the acts that it seeks to amend, having to do with marriages in the way that they were established under the colonial order. This bill, therefore, simply deals with the issue of at what age does an individual, male or female, have the right to marry one another. It is the only matter that is addressed in this bill. And so a minimum age is set, and that minimum is 18, the age of majority in Trinidad and Tobago. So marriage, as I indicated before, becomes an issue of a contract between consenting adults, male and female, because that is the limit of the bill. And there is one law for everybody, and I want to stress how important this is, and you will see why I'm stressing why it is important. Now, I support this principle. I am against child marriage. I am against forced marriage. I am against interfering with underage girls and little children by big men. So what is the point of this bill? To ensure that no one under the age of 18 is married. That is the consequence of this law. And one age for all citizens without discrimination. So that is a factor. It is a secular law in a multi-religious society. And this is the reason why the issues have become contentious. And the law, by establishing the age of majority, makes child marriages illegal and makes any marriage under the age of 18 from 17 years, 11 months and days down it makes all of these marriages illegal, any such marriage illegal. So what is the problem? The real problem in this society, it seems to me, based on the statistics, and I will share some of them, is not child marriage. It is child abuse by adults and very early sexual initiation of the female child. I want to indicate that in 2004, the World Bank did a report in which it surveyed the schools of the entire Caribbean region in the English-speaking Caribbean. And it concluded that the Caribbean was that place in the world in which sexual initiation of the female happened at the earliest age. This is 2004. And therefore, we have been living with this problem for some time. Now, I was principal of the university at the time, and I brought it to the attention of the Minister of Education at the time. I do not know if anything was done. I don't know if anything has been done subsequently. But what I do know is that it is a persistent problem that does not go away, and problems like these escalate. So I want to state that this bill does not address that problem. Amending laws that give religious communities comfort is part of the problem of this bill. Because as I said, it's not a new bill. It's a bill which seeks to amend 5 different acts. And by doing that, what it does is that it interferes with the comfort zone of those people who had comfort under those laws. So what was the meaning of those laws which were written in the colonial period? Was that, remember, for some of these communities, Hindu, Muslim, Orissa, these communities were not part of the legal system. The marriages were not acknowledged. Okay? The child born out of wedlock was deemed to be illegitimate. So this was a comfort given by the British colonial authorities to bring people into the legal system and to give them legal status and legitimacy to their children. Okay? So this was also a negotiated agreement because they sat down, the colonial authorities sat down with the people, with the various communities, and they engaged them to try to determine what would be the ages that they would agree on. What age would they agree for each community? So I asked the question, and this is not a nonsensical question, it's a legitimate question. Is 18 the only right age because it is the age of majority? Does what it is that disqualifies somebody at 16, or why didn't we make it 20, or 25, or 21? So, at the end of the day, although it is the age of majority, and although it is the age 18, there is nothing sacrosanct about the age of majority, nor is there anything sacrosanct about the number 18. Are there special or extenuating circumstances that one might consider in determining this matter of what are the conditions under which marriage takes place? And I am saying that there are. Why did the UN establish the global norm? As I remember it, the first document that was done on this stated that an age would be agreed, but no number was given to the age in that first UN document. And secondly, the reason why they established this as a norm is because there are many countries in which marriages are. There are many countries in which marriages are agreed upon without basically adolescents and little children having anything to do with it. And the question we have to ask is this a reality in Trinidad and Tobago? It's not, in my view. And if it does occur, it must be more in the exception than the norm in Trinidad and Tobago. Secondly, do we want to be, as a country, do we aspire to be a progressive and enlightened country with enlightened and progressive laws? And I would hope that every member of parliament in Trinidad and Tobago would say, yes, we want to be such a country. But there are issues with the bill that I want to say. The first one I've already flagged, which is the issue of the three-fifths majority, and the fact that it does interfere with that constitutional negotiation process between the colonial order and the various communities, and the comfort that it gave by negotiation. Secondly, are there the substance of the changes here? What is the meaning of the substance of the change? And I mentioned some of those, saying that it addressed only a narrow band of the meaning of marriage in the system, and takes a narrow view of how you solve what, if you want to call it, the marriage issue. And I want to state categorically that I support marriage at the age of 18, and that everybody on this side, the members of the opposition, support marriage at 18. We don't have a problem with that. But we have an issue here in the bill included, if you break this law, there are severe penalties. I think you get 7 years jail in one instance, if I'm not mistaken, if you violate the law. And what is the penalty for the Attorney General breaking the law by pulling out the the three-fifths majority that originally came with this bill? I believe that he should include the three-fifths majority in this bill. It's important. Let us debate it. Let us come to a consensus, and let us pass a good, enlightened bill for Trinidad and Tobago. What is the reality of Trinidad and Tobago? By and large, nobody is getting married at the age of 18. People get married in their 20s. They get married in their 30s. What is happening now is that women, 2/3 of the university and the tertiary system in this country consists of women getting their degrees. They do not get married until afterwards, if they choose to get married. And that is the reality of Trinidad and Tobago today. And so education has had an effect on the age at which young people get married. Secondly, marriage is not as popular as it used to be. Some people postpone the business of marriage for as long as possible because they think it interferes with their freedom and their ability to self-actualize and to do certain things. And that is a factor. Thirdly, the issue of divorce. 1 in 3 marriages, based on the statistics I have, end up in divorce. And this bill does not address the issue of education today, the issue of attitudes towards marriage, the issue of divorce and the realities of divorce. It does not address domestic violence, which is a reality in the country. It does not address violence against children. It does not address the reality of family disintegration, which is the one source of never-ending evolutionary chaos in the society of Trinidad and Tobago and throughout the entire Caribbean. It does not address the issue of abortion, of child's pregnancies, or women's health issues. None of those issues are affected by this bill. So how does this bill, Madam Speaker, fit into the picture? It does not, as I say, address any of the above. All it addresses is the legal age of marriage, which it sets at 18, and it makes all citizens, regardless of religious affiliation, equal before the law. Now, I want to state at the outset, because of what I'm going to say after, that I am for a secular society of enlightened laws, in which there are boundaries between church and state, and in which there is a reasonable respect for the separation of powers, executive, parliament, judiciary, and where there is deep respect for the thinking, feeling, and views of the people and the opportunities of the citizens to express themselves freely. I am not in favor of the notion of theocratic state in this country. I am totally against it. I am against the principle of a theocratic state in a world of multiple beliefs and in a world of individual freedom of thought. But in a multi-religious society, the state must be sensitive, as it must be responsive as well, and as it must be responsible as a government. And I want to juxtapose these things. Because you are sensitive to an interest doesn't make you theocratic in disposition. Democracy demands that you be sensitive to every interest, although you run a secular democratic state. I said that I stated my position on that, and I want to elaborate on it, which is that I am not in favor of any Christian state in Trinidad and Tobago, of any Hindu state in Trinidad and Tobago. I am not in favor of any Islamic state in Trinidad and Tobago. I am not interested in any Jewish state or any kind of religious state for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I like secular democracy. Now, that does not mean when you have a society that religion does not affect it. That does not mean, for instance, that the Protestant ethic and beliefs from the founding fathers onwards will not affect the norms of American society. It does, and we saw it. We have seen it manifest in many electoral decisions and political actions. This does not mean that the Anglican Church will not influence the norms of British society. This does not mean that Hinduism will not influence style and patterns of behavior in a country like India. This does not mean that in Indonesia, Islam will not influence human conduct, behavior, and outlook. But these are states. They are secular democracies, all of them. And we have established in 1947 in one instance, 1948 in the other, a Jewish state such as Israel, but you find that it is very hard for Arabs who were born there to be equal citizens when you have a religious state. That is part of the problem. And in an Islamic state of Pakistan, which in many ways has its areas of enlightenment, not only do non-Muslims have a challenge to live there, but even different sects of Islam have a hard time coexisting. And Muslims who are neither Sunni nor Shiite, like the Ahmadiyas, for instance, are not regarded as Muslims at all, although they themselves profess to be Muslims. So give me a secular state anytime. I am willing to concede that the dominant religious tradition will have a significant influence on mores and values, just as the dominant ideology of the free market and capitalism, or democratic socialism in another case, or state-driven capitalism as in China, or socialism will have an influence on the economic system and on human behavior in the economy and economic system. But I am in no way prepared to facilitate the surrender of the state to religious ideology, not by a majority and certainly not by a minority. And I want to remind this country, it is very important, and I hope citizens who are listening will take this in, Madam Speaker, through you, which is that this is a society of religious minorities. Everybody is a minority. This is not a majoritarian state, by any religion, by any ethnicity. It is a nation of minorities. That is why we've got to find the means and ways to be sensitive in order to harmonize and live together. In a society such as ours, as multi-ethnic and multi-religious as it is, with a tradition of having evolved from a parliamentary democratic system and a written constitution which sets out the framework for social, political, and economic order, we must repudiate the wrongs of the past, yes, but we must also respect the good traditions we have inherited, and we must act thoughtfully in the present to create the condition for an enlightened, humane, and civilized future, because it is on the future that we must focus. It is within this framework, therefore, that I want to address the issues beyond an 18-year legal age for marriage for any citizen in Trinidad and Tobago. Having said that, I want to reiterate, we on this side are committed to the idea of a legal age of marriage being 18 years of age. We don't have any problem with that. So I have in my hand here the bill essentials that was prepared for the original bill, which is the bill which had the 3/5 majority clause in it, because it acknowledged the violation of constitutional rights of communities. And it talks about the situation of child marriages, and it quotes, for instance, from Ms. Ryder Bach, consultant of the Ministry of Gender, Youth and Child Development. And it indicates, it reported that more than 8,400 girls and 1,300 boys under the age of 19 years were married in Trinidad and Tobago during the period 1997 to 2007. So young marriages, and it seems based on this, because she uses 19, but I suspect that what she is indicating, that some of them may have been below the age of 18 as well. And she further indicates the statistics reveal that 328 Hindu minors, 103 Muslim minors, and 117 other minors were wed under a Christian civil marriage union between 2006 to 2014. So it does happen, but it's not a very large number. Okay, the largest number here is 328, and when you add the total, 3 and 1, 4 and 1, 5 is just over 500, about 550 people during a period of 8 years. So if you divide that by 8, you begin to see it is a rather small number per year. So as I said before, there were reasons why the UN wanted to have this. There are norms that have been established in Europe, for instance, and there are concerns about backward countries in which basically they brutalize young people. And in those countries, there was a concern, and the UN took an interest in interfering in this matter and trying to bring these countries up to some level of enlightenment. But in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't have that kind of crisis, and it would be wrong to pretend that we are trying to solve some kind of crisis in Trinidad and Tobago. In this document prepared by Parliament, Bill Essentials, it takes the view, this is on page 3, the bill infringes an individual's freedom of practice of their religious belief as provided for in Section 4 of the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, and also the general protection of a person's rights and freedoms in accordance with Section 5 of the Constitution. As such, in accordance with Section 13 of the Constitution, the Act which contravenes Section 4 must be passed with 3/5 majority vote, both houses. Now, this is something that the Parliament circulated to all parliamentarians. And the Attorney General goes in the Senate and he just pull it out just so. I do not understand it, Madam Speaker, and the Attorney General better account to this Parliament.
Honourable Member for Caroni Central, your original 30 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes. Please proceed.
I'll be grateful. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Just to conclude the last sentence, the Attorney General, I'm glad he's present now, needs to account to the Parliament and explain clearly and with precision to the Parliament what was his thinking and what prevents him from reintroducing that particular clause which allows for a majority of parliamentarians, larger, not a simple majority, under the Constitution to pass this law. Now, I talked about the colonial order and the way they engaged the communities at that time in colonial times when we were not yet independent and where we were struggling and striving to bring communities together to build a nation. And I have an article that was sent to me by one Zainul A. Khan, and I will not read Mr. Zainul Khan's opinions because those are his opinions. But what I would read from him is a very important thing that he included here as a quotation. The following extract of the address of the then Attorney General, an expatriate like most of the senior government officials when Trinidad and Tobago was a colony of England, in moving the second reading of the bill on the 1st of November 1935, Madam Speaker, and he quotes it. The bill constitutes a very liberal effort to satisfy the aspirations of the Muslim community in relation to the civil status in matters of marriage, legitimacy, and divorce. The bill was forwarded to the Secretary of State for the Colonies, who submitted the same to the authorities in India. Certain suggestions were made by different authorities consulted and by some of the Muslim associations here and in India. Insofar as it has been practicable, these have been embodied in the present bill. Every endeavor has been made to meet the wishes of the Muslim community. It has not been possible to satisfy them in every respect, but it is believed that the bill in its present form is acceptable to the members of the community. Now, what I want to point out about this is that this is the colonial order. Yeah. These are colonials in charge of a subject people. And yet they would make the consultation real enough to get something that would satisfy the community. And then he provides some other information, but I won't go into that. I simply want to make the one simple point that even under the realm of the colonial order, consultations could be done in such a manner as to satisfy the challenge that people face. The second thing that I would like to raise is the Hindu women's organization's position on this. When you read their position, they agree fully with the position of 18 years as the legal age for marriage. But what they said is that while we promote marriage between people who are 18 years old and over, we recognize that in certain circumstances it may be desirable for a girl between 16 and 18 to be married, but this should be done with her own consent and consent of her parents or guardian. The female parents have equal rights to consent after parties wishing to be married have received premarital counseling by qualified professional counselors. After an application is made to a judge in chambers or specially appointed committee by the President of the Republic in order to determine the circumstances of each case, only after it is determined that the person to whom the between 16 to 18-year-old girl is to be married is not undertaking the marriages for exploitation. In cases where the person to whom the 16 to 18-year-old girl is to be married is no older than 3 years or senior at the time of marriage. So if you get a young person, you might call them a child if they're under 18, a young adolescent. If you have a young woman at the age of 16 and they're getting married, the Hindu women's organization's position is that the man should not be older than 19 years old. There's a band that they are suggesting. Okay? So I want to say that the Hindu Women's Organization's position is for 18 years of age, the age of majority. They are supporting it. But they are saying we need to make provision and create a special context for agreement to a marriage that is under 18 but not under the age of 16, so between 16 and 18. The Islamic Ladies Social and Cultural Association, they wrote a letter to me, I'm sure it went to the Attorney General as well. And basically, in summary, they says, the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act 4502 states that the age of marriage is 18 years for both males and females. However, there is a provision for the marriage of males and females less than 18 years that requires parental consent. Regrettably, this bill, presented by the Honorable Attorney General, completely removes any exception for marriage of those under 18 years of age. We want included in the new bill an exception which would facilitate the rare cases. And they point out that 103 marriages took place over a 10-year period, that is about 10 a year, all right, where a girl or boy under 18 is desirous of getting married. So with parental consent and a judicial order that they can get married. So you have a situation where the position of a Hindu women's organization and the position of a Islamic women's organization are consistent. They are the same. The network of NGOs, Hindu Women's Organization, supports Hindu Women's Organization position on child marriages. And theirs is the same thing, which is parental consent and judicial scrutiny for age between 16 and 18. And some may ask the question, it is not answered by the members who proposed that. Some may ask the question, why 16, Madam Speaker? And I would say that there is a simple answer for that, because I asked the question, why 18? Why not 20? Why not 25? 18 because it's the age of majority. Why 16? Because at the age of 16, a young woman or a young man would have completed high school in Trinidad and Tobago. And whatever the circumstances they might find themselves in afterwards, they have the basic grounding for acquiring and being exposed to higher education of some kind, or the basis for skilling themselves in some way. Because what you don't want is a set of young people who are children themselves and who have no means of economic self-sustenance and economic sustainability. And in this day and age, education is critical. It doesn't matter whether you're married, you're not married, whether you're married at 16 or the age of 45. The point is that if you are not educated in this world, it is very difficult to find a place. And I got this very significant article. I was not able to trace the name of the author. I looked for it. I could not. I don't know if they sent it to me in an envelope. The Age of Marriage, the Case for Reform Now. And it is a well-argued paper, and they go through various issues here. And they go through the entire international history of this thing, and they relate it to the contemporary context in Trinidad and Tobago. And I have limited time, Madam Speaker, but I don't want to take my time by dwelling too much on this. I simply want to say that at the end, you know, they take a position which will allow for some flexibility other than the age of 18 in special circumstances. And then the politics of child marriage, I have an article here in which the person, this one is by Indira Rampasad, I imagine it was in the Express. She says, She says that while marriage of minors continues to be a cause of concern, it is a burning issue for the average. It is not a burning issue for the average citizen. Rather, the bigger outrage is the many children who are being murdered. Again, making the case that child marriage is not a big issue in Trinidad and Tobago. All right. So, I have the minimum legal age for marriage for many countries here, but I will simply mention Barbados. And they have a clause that allows for 16. Belgium, they have a clause that allows for 16. I want to get closer to the Caribbean. Guyana, they have a clause that allows for 16. Italy, Jamaica, Japan, not Japan, sorry. Yeah, Japan does have a clause for 16 and so on. So, you know, having some flexibility from 16 and 18 is not a big problem. I want to say as I conclude, Madam Speaker, is that we have no problem with the 18-year-old in this bill, 18-year-old issue, and the 18-year-old benchmark for marriages by not by consent but by mutual contract in this country. But we want the AG to show some flexibility. I know he's done some consultation. I've raised this matter with him directly. Show some flexibility and sensitivity to the communities, including the Hindu Women's Organization, the Islamic Organization, and many organizations, the SDMS, the Muslim organizations, the Orishas. Let's take them into account and accommodate them and understand the context in which these bills were passed that we are now amending, even though in a colonial orders. So let us show some sensitivity to the public interest and to historical antecedents. We would like to recommend, in addition to the law that you have here for 18-year-old by mutual consent, by contract, 16-year-olds with parental consent, and the judicial intervention, that's to say, the judicial scrutiny, if you want to call it that. And it's not going to be 1,000 cases. It's likely to be not more than 20 or 30 cases in any given a year over every single religious denomination. And we would like to urge the AG to restore the special majority together with these amendments so that we can pass this law as good law in Trinidad and Tobago. I would like to close, Madam Speaker, by asking, what about the future? There is a big challenge with the future of marriage. I want to say that. Marriage as an institution is severely challenged, and there are things that we need to do in the society to begin, first of all, to address the nurturing of families, and secondly, to take into account the changes in thinking that are happening in relation to the notion of marriage. The second thing is that the most important consideration for Trinidad and Tobago is the future of the family. I don't know what the shape of the family will be in the future. It is already transforming tremendously. We used to think about mother and father and children and extended families. We have single parent families. We have all kinds of permutations of that evolving now, and therefore the family concept and the notion of neighborhood and community and society, this is very important. The care and nurturing of children, given the kind of society we have and the brutalization of young women by unthinking and really unscrupulous men in this society, and the children that come out of those kinds of situations, how are we going to nurture them to be good citizens in Trinidad and Tobago? That is something that we need to be concerned about. And the final thing is that out of this amalgam, all of these challenges that we have, none of which this bill addresses, but I understand how the bill is circumscribed and what it is attempted to do. The challenge of building a harmonious and humane future society in Trinidad and Tobago, and how we do that. And how we do that is by the way we govern, and by the way we listen when we govern, and by the way we respond to people who have legitimate interests as we do the business of governance, and as we come to the Parliament and use the parliament as an instrument that makes consensus and democracy possible, rather than railroading a bill through the parliament. Thank you very much, Madam.
Member for Laventille West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my friend, the member for Caroni Central, brought to a bit of a climax his presentation by calling on the Attorney General and by extension the government, who he gives legal advice to, given his role, his office in our Constitution. He called on the Attorney General to use this office and to use this Parliament to build a harmonious society. But I think, and to look with an eye on the future for building a harmonious society in which we can all live and in peace. But I think that is precisely what the Attorney General is about in the measure that is in front of us. Law has to be certain. We live in this democracy, unlike England, which has only a partly written constitution, and there are other nations without a constitution, and in some cases with a constitution that is rejected, observed more in its breach than in practice. We have dictators around the world, dictatorships. Our Constitution provides for equality of treatment for all. It is the supreme law of the country, of this republic. The member for Caroni Central as well, Madam Speaker, called on the Attorney General to consider allowing in this legislation persons at the age of 16 to become married and have those marriages consummated with the consent of their parents. Let me begin by showing some of the confusion of that proposition. I went on a little search engine here and pulled up, Madam Speaker, 38 Bible verses, as a Christian myself, in this democracy. Pulled up 38 Bible verses about marriage. Every one of them, and I'll quote only two, in my view, implies that those who are engaged in the business of marriage must have knowledge, must have an understanding of the solemnity and the seriousness of it. Every one of these quotations. And this is a Christian perspective, recognizing in this democracy, which is multiracial and multi-ethnic and multi-religious, that there are other views. So the Constitution that the Attorney General is pinning these measures on is designed as the great equalizer of it all, so that we can achieve the harmony that the members spoke of. And the principle in the Constitution that the Attorney General has hung his hat on in these measures is the principle, the constitutionally enshrined principle of equality of treatment and the diversity of its application. Equality. So on the one hand, he's calling for harmony, and on the other hand, he's suggesting that you get some disharmony by creating exceptions to the harmony. So every single one, let me just run two of these Christian Bible or biblical quotations, which in my view implies that the person getting involved in marriage at age 12 and at age 16, it is difficult to imply this, but they must have an understanding. Genesis chapter 2 verse 24, I quote, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother." Deliberate actions, mature thought, deliberate thought. He must leave his mother and his father and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one in the flesh. Let's be realistic. In today's world in particular, 16-year-olds might be capable of that, but not in all cases. Not in all cases. It is the reason why we see so much turmoil and difficulty with 16 and 15 and 17-year-olds. Maturity in most cases comes a little bit later. So I'm not saying it is not possible that the quality of man could not be found in a 16-year-old, but the possibility of that is not as prevalent as my friend wants us to accept. And then there's another quotation, Ephesians chapter 5, verses 23 to 33. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. You think any boy understand that? That he might sanctify her. 12 marks him what the meaning of sanctify. Having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. All of these I submit, and the other 36 quotations suggest that the man has to be deliberate and understand the thing. So the member for Caroni Central, wanting this exception at 16 and taking support from the Hindu Women's Organization, which says, we accept 18, which the Attorney General presents as the general age, but we should have exceptions to that in special cases between the ages of 16 and 18. No less than 16, they say. I am suggesting, quite apart from the high principle constitutionally enshrined about equality of treatment, which is what the AG is aiming at in these measures, there's also the question, Madam Speaker, of certainty of the law. Law must be certain as far as is humanly or legally practicable.
Would the honourable member give way? Okay. I just want to say that the principle that I advocated, which is that parental consent judicial review for 16 to 18 does not apply to any religion. I am asking, just like the 18 across the board, all citizens, that this also apply across the board, all citizens.
My friends can applaud as they wish. I never spoke about any particular religion. I spoke about age 16. And once it requires parental consent, it implies that that 16-year-old is unable to make a solemn decision, as I was suggesting, coming out of the biblical texts, recognizing that that is only biblical text and supported by Christians, but there are other views in the society. So I didn't say that, but let me press on. The member asks with great aplomb, why did the AG unilaterally remove the need for the special majority provision that was presented in the original bill in the Senate? Well, the answer to that is simple. In his professional opinion, on the basis of not whim and fancy, but legal authority for which he is well suited and well qualified to analyze and understand, he decided on the basis of two major authorities, the Northern Construction Authority and the Surat Authority, which I obtained a copy of without an opportunity on this occasion to read again because I had read it sometime in the distant past. But essentially these two authorities make the point that it is not in every case where one of the constitutionally enshrined rights in sections 4 and 5 of the Constitution, it is not in every case where one of these are being abrogated or otherwise, a special majority is necessary. It is on that basis, member for Caroni Central, that the Attorney General, quite properly and legally, on the basis of his professional analysis, decided, and supported by 2 independent senators and many others, decided to remove it. It wasn't done by whim. It was done on the basis of legal authority. And if he doesn't act on the basis of legal authority, who else will? So the answer is as simple as that. And my friend the member for Caroni Central, told us that this bill doesn't address issues like violence on women and human trafficking and child abuse and same-sex marriage. Well, the answer to that is very simple. Those were not the matters in contemplation here. It was simply to create a level playing field and to harmonize, to use your words, our law by causing the age of marriage to be 18, the age of majority in Trinidad and Tobago across the board with certainty in this democracy for everyone to live by. And inside of that, the old position that we inherited from the British, which he acclaimed here today, where the ages were 12 for females and 14 for males. And there was that element in that time when the British purported that and introduced it into colonial Trinidad and Tobago in British law and even before. Inequality among sexes was a norm. But today the world has moved well past that.
Child marriage was a norm.
Child marriage was a norm as well.
Generation was 40 years.
Yes, a generation, as the Attorney General is reminding me, was 40 years. Today is 20. The pace of life, our circumstances are substantially different, Madam Speaker. And as a result, what would have been bearable and tolerable as this, 12 and 14 in that time, you can't sustain that now. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago says equality of treatment for all, include that all takes into account male as well as female. So I hope with that little persuasion, the member for Caroni Central will get off of his high, unconstitutional horse and settle down behind the law and best practice as now exists. And talking about best practice, Madam Speaker, the Attorney General is also proposing the age of 18 for another reason. Trinidad and Tobago is a member state of the United Nations. As party to, and as a result, is party to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And in that convention, the age of 18 is where it's at. That is the international standard which we are signed to as a nation state. That's another reason why the age of 18 is now before us. So again, I call on the member to come off of his high unconstitutional horse and settle down behind international best practice as adumbrated and written into the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So there you have it. And all the other matters, important as they are not before us for consideration in this bill, in these measures. Member for Caroni Central. Madam Speaker, this position, as I have said before, the right being affirmed in these measures is the Section 4B rights of the Constitution, the right of individual equality before the law, and the protection of the law. 12-year-olds deserve it, 14-year-olds deserve it, 18-year-olds, we all deserve it. Once you are under the ambit of the Constitution and in this space. Of course, you can't please everyone. Democracy, they say, must be so big and so bold and so all-embracing. It must be such that it could tolerate even criticism of it. It must be able to tolerate challenges to it. 1990 proved a very, very outstanding example. Our democracy was challenged in this house. For 6 days, persons lost their lives, including a member of parliament. And those who breached the Constitution and insulted our dignity in the way they did, and challenged the state in the way they did, you know what? The very Constitution said they were entitled to their day in court. And the results of that day in court would be upheld by us all. So nobody didn't gun them down, as happens in many countries, tie their hands behind their back and put some in their heads. No. They went through the legal process and they even succeeded to some extent. They argued that the amnesty was valid. One court felt yes, the Court of Appeals felt no. The Privy Council upheld it and said they shouldn't be retried. Too much time had gone. And so democracy, in this political democracy, must be able to embrace even those who challenge it. That's the nature of the thing called democracy. The Constitution, therefore, the great equalizer. So you can't please everyone in circumstances such as ours. Some may want to hold fast to traditional, religious, sectarian positions. But we hope that in this democracy, since we all live under the banner of this democracy and the Constitution, which every single parliamentarian is sworn to when we come to this house, we swear to uphold the Constitution and the law. And some of us would have sworn several times in different ways, as attorneys at law, as ministers of government, as members of the police service or many organizations. Yes. Take oaths. One of them, for all of us in this house, is to live by the Constitution. So while we understand and embrace and accept that there are those who may be opposed to this leveling of the playing field, this observation of equality that the Attorney General is reaching out to in these measures, we understand not everyone would be happy about it. But we got to move on in harmony, and the Constitution reigns supreme. It ought to. So, the Attorney General didn't arrive at this by whim, as I submitted earlier, Madam Speaker. And he's not the... and I have an article here written by a Dr. Arif, or Anif Bolkan. Recently, the article was published in the Express on the 26th of February 2017, responding to criticisms that came from our friends on the other side, led by the leader of the opposition. In her criticism of the Attorney General removing the requirement for a special majority in the Senate when the original bill was presented, she is quoted as describing it as anarchy, tyranny, and dictatorship. Strong words, not surprising coming from the goodly lady. She screams a lot. In the teacup scandal, she screamed. For 2 years, they want to know what I'm speaking about. Just permit me to tell them.
Madam
They
Speaker,
lied to this
Madam Speaker, 48-1. 48. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I withdraw that. I withdraw that, madam.
Okay. And member, while I understand all of where you're going, I want to remind you about relevance with respect to the course that you're now about to embark upon.
I'm most grateful, Madam Speaker, I should be so guided. I was simply saying that the leader of the opposition described the removal of the provision, innocuous and constitutionally powerful as it was, and accurate, as anarchy and tyranny and dictatorship. Others commented on it. So in response to those strong comments, a certain Dr. Anif Bolkan, B-U-L-K-A-N, a senior lecturer in law, published an article. And I'll quote elements of it only for those who are looking and listening to us in this house, because I'm sure my friends on the other side are optimally aware of it, though no mention was made of it in my friend for Caroni Central's presentation. I'll quote a little bit of it only to demonstrate that the Attorney General is getting support from someone who is not known to be any PNM and certainly not a member of the government, but an intellectual, a lecturer from the Faculty of Law. And he is saying, let me quote. I'll just quote a selected area of it. He says, yet uncertainty as to whether the Attorney General acted properly or not persists, played out on the national stage. The controversy originates from the fact that Trinidad and Tobago's Bill of Rights, uniquely among the entire Commonwealth Caribbean, sets out rights without limits in Section 4 and 5. In recent times, this has led to the extrajudicial comments by one former Chief Justice that those rights are absolute and can only be limited by way of a special majority under Section 13. This view was taken up by a minority in the Court of Appeal, albeit a commanding one, who defended it in the 2014 Francis decision. They gave several reasons, including the alleged intent of the framers, the distinct nature of the society, and even considerations of policy. Example, the need to prevent amendment by subterfuge, to support their position that Section 4 and 5 rights could only be limited by existing laws, laws passed during an emergency or by way of special majority, or by an amendment of the right itself. Nonetheless, despite the detail and sincerity of these arguments, there are compelling reasons rooted in precedent, human rights jurisprudence, and even political theory which they do not overcome. And he went on to analyze those, ultimately coming to the conclusion, and I quote his last paragraph in the article, regrettably, the controversy spawned on this issue seems to have provoked the AG's midway reversal exacerbated by comments and so on. I quote again, but tactics aside, and you know, the writer of this article, let me just segue for a little bit. He said, tactics aside. You know why he said that, Madam Speaker, if we all be honest? The AG also was able, it was also, in addition to the constitutionally compelling arguments, it was also a good tactic at one and the same time, because my friends on the other side always look forward to special majority bills here because we know long in advance they will not support any measure we bring that requires their parliamentary support. We know that. So it was FATCA. One of my colleagues shouting FATCA. What a fat joke. They had to be taken kicking and screaming by the Business and Banking Committee.
Yes, Member for Shagona.
Could you protect me, please, Madam Speaker? I have been going at even keel all evening, and now they are beginning to provoke me and to stir my ire.
Please, I don't want you to be provoked at all. Please continue, address your comments here, please.
For indulgence, and I am grateful for it. Thank you. Let me continue, tactic aside. I'm quoting the last few lines of this article by Dr. Bulkan, that law lecturer from the law faculty. I quote, the AG is on solid ground by insisting that special majorities are not required for every law that impacts on fundamental rights. His belated appreciation of this hardly ushers in any creeping dictatorship. Ultimately, any law that restricts rights is subject to judicial review by the court, which will decide. That is it. I have nothing more to say on that matter. I rest. So who wants to challenge it? They can. And the principle in Surat, as far as I recall, says you don't really need a special majority. It is still amenable to judicial review. In any event, whether it passed with a special majority or not, the court could look upon it and frown upon it, as the courts have done, the constitutional courts of this country has done consistently since we established this constitutional democracy. Right? But while that is so, and we know now that not every right requires amendment to it or subrogation of it requires a special majority, provided according to Surat and the Northern Construction case that there is a legitimate aim, and I don't think you could find a more legitimate aim or aims, more legitimate aims than the AG has enunciated in his presentation of these measures. And once as well, they are proportionate. And on those two sub-tests, Madam Speaker, we feel confident that the measure as presented in this House, without the need for a special majority by the Attorney General, should get the support of this House and will remain unchallenged for those reasons. This is not a theocracy, this is a democracy. And I've also already addressed the question raised by my friend, the position, the very Hindu women would have spent a lot of time researching this matter. These matters directly affect them, touch their lives in meaningful ways, and I can understand, and we welcome their thoughts on the matter. But there's another principle to be considered, which they may not have considered, and that is the need for certainty of the law and avoiding opportunities for exceptions and variances and differences. And more importantly, Madam Speaker, the need for equality of treatment in all cases as demanded by the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. So I applaud the Hindu Women's Organization for their intervention in this matter. I thank them for their thoughts. But I'm sure they know, because among them must be lawyers as well, doctors, housewives, professionals, all well-meaning people. And I have a suspicion that it would have been, as I said, well thought out. We thank them for that. But as I said, equality is the peg on which the Attorney General hangs his legal hat in these measures. India, my friend called a number of countries. Well, today, India, across the board, the largest, most populous democracy in the world, established since India was the first British colony to become independent back in 1947. Ghana was the second in 1957. We came some years later in 1962. Barbados in 66 and so on. Jamaica a couple months before us as well in 1962. In India, across that most populous democracy, 18 is the number. 18 is the number today. The home of 21, sorry. 18 and 21. Across Africa, 18 and 21 as well. Large continent as well. Yeah. Germany, only today I'm advised, abolished child marriage. Today, Madam Speaker. Indonesian Muslim women also called strongly today as we speak for the abolition of child marriage. As we speak. So the Attorney General finds tremendous support at home and abroad from people who I am suspecting are more sincere in their pursuits than some of my friends on the other side. It's only a suspicion. I didn't call your name, member for Caroni East. I know the word sincerity troubles you, but I would not be distracted. I know. I would not be distracted.
Member for Laventille West. If you could kindly direct your contribution, I'm sure you're seasoned enough to rise above crosstalk, and certainly if you direct it here, you won't be distracted. I just ask you to withdraw that about the sincerity.
My friends in yes, please. I withdraw that. I withdraw that. Madam Speaker is still provoking me from the side.
I know with your training, it is hard for you to be provoked. Please continue and direct your contribution this
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there's one other provision before I close. It is an amendment to Section 3 of the Marriage Act, which I took the trouble to look at. It's an amendment to Section 23, Section 25. Oh, I'm sorry. It's... Yeah, I did. Don't trouble your heart. It's in this bill, Clause 3H, where there is proposed an amendment to Section 28 of the Marriage Act by deleting the words 6 o'clock in the afternoon and substituting the words 9 o'clock in the evening. My friend for Caroni Central raised issue over this. I thought at a glance, Madam Speaker, and observing the way things have gone in the world, Madam Speaker, people are now much more adventurous and much more exciting than the old traditional fogies used to be back in our days. Well, my days, Madam Speaker, I shouldn't bring you there. You may not be in my category in that regard. But, Madam Speaker, I'm a child of the 50s. Marriage was about that old solemn thing in the church and the pastor and the hymns being sung and all that. Today, people are getting married underwater, sailing down rivers, skydiving.
Honourable Member for Laventille West, your original 30 minutes have expired. You are entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to avail yourself of it. Please proceed.
I am most grateful. I'm most grateful. I saw recently on my television a couple decided to get married in cowboy outfit, Western style with the typical carriages and gun sacks and the cowboy hats and all of that. That's the way the world goes. So that in these adventurous approaches to marriage, sometimes the thing takes a little longer, they go further. And the section 28 of which we speak, under the rubric solemnization of marriage, requires, and I'm quoting from the section, however, such marriage shall be solemnized with open doors between the hours of 6 o'clock in the forenoon and 6 o'clock in the afternoon of the same day, and in the presence of 2 or more credible witnesses beside the said marriage officer. So, that is what the law says. And the Attorney General is proposing to extend that to 9 p.m. in the evening to accommodate the vagaries and the adventurous spirits of couples who get married today. My friend, the member for Caroni Central, reminded us accurately, one assumes, that traditional Hindu weddings used to take place in the night. So I think the Attorney General is here extending the time and facilitating later than now exists activity. As it now stands, and this law, and the law I just quoted, has been so since 1923. And it included the last 5 years when they were in government, but they did nothing about it. Now that the Attorney General is doing something about it, extending it from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. to facilitate solemnization after dark, so to speak, he is being criticized by my friend. When they had an opportunity for 5 years to attack it and did nothing about it, rather than criticize, he should be complimenting the Attorney General for facilitating hearing. And this law that I just quoted, written and made law here, proclaimed since 1923, was amended 18 times since then. The last amendment to it was in 2013 when they were in government. They amended it twice in 2013 and did nothing about it, and find themselves wanting to criticize my Attorney General, the Attorney General today. Again, paper-thin criticism, only looking for grounds to make themselves large and obstacles to the achievement of that constitutionally enshrined high principle of equality of the law, and that every man is equal before the law, and equal before the law as well. So, Madam Speaker, with those few comments, I would like to commend these measures to all my colleagues in this House, and as well to urge them to give support to it. And I know that they are a little bit taken aback and a little hurt that the special majority provision was removed. But I hope I have demonstrated, Madam Speaker, that it was removed for good and sound constitutional/legal reasons. And therefore their desire to have objected on the basis of it has now been removed. And as Lord Denning, since I'm in the mode of law, Lord Denning is well known to have said, when the reason for the rule disappears, the rule too should disappear. So now the reason for their objection has disappeared. I think their objection itself should disappear. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Member for St. Augustine.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It was truly uplifting and enabling our intellect in this Parliament earlier today to have heard the member for Caroni Central. It is a rarity to have heard such a contribution that was so rich with intellect, with analysis, and a deep flavoring of philosophy, delivered only by one who just not knew, but truly understands what we are about. It is painful, however, to have been followed by what we just heard.
Padded up.
It is one of those criticisms of persons, as a friend told me, that's a dictionary, boy. I said, what do you mean? Lots of words, and the only coherence between them is that they start with the first letter that is common to them all. No other coherence to the arguments. A dictionary is what we have. Lots of words, meanings not connected, no symbiotic relationship, no philosophical grounding in the arguments I've just heard. And I do not like to condemn speakers. But I think when we are being misled by language, it is important for us to refocus what we are about. And you know, to have used the Constitution in such an abrasive, flippant, irresponsible manner to support an argument that is devoid of any compassion and understanding of constitutionality really is an abuse of the Parliament on our ears. My friend took the liberty to try to defend that which is totally indefensible.
He's running.
When an Attorney General, for whatever reason, brings a bill before the People's Parliament, and in it is contained a requirement for a constitutional majority, I expect then that there would have been good reason for that to have been put into the bill. And it is not the Attorney General himself, and I, having had the experience of government, being very close to that office, the CPPC's department, and all the professionals who we must pay tremendous homage to, for their professional input. A decision was taken to bring this bill and to put in it a requirement for a constitutional majority. To have heard the Attorney General in another place say that because of tactical reasons, they remove the constitutional requirement is nothing short of terrorism in the People's Parliament. And when my friend engendered the Acts of 1919 to the debate, he could not be more right. Because that was an attack with guns on the democracy and of our Constitution. Today, it is an attack from the Attorney General and the government on the Constitution of the people within the Parliament, and using law to justify something that is totally wrong and unacceptable in our society. And it will do us all well, milady, because I borrowed the Constitution from a friend from Couva South, and to have looked at the and to have looked at it and to have read, whereas the people of Trinidad and Tobago, have affirmed that the nation of Trinidad and Tobago is founded upon principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God, faith in fundamental human rights and freedoms, the position of the family in a society of free men and free institutions, the dignity of the human person and the equal and inalienable rights which all members of the human family are endowed by their Creator. B, respect the principles of social justice, and therefore believe that the operation of the economic system should result, and I shall go to C, have asserted their beliefs in a democratic society in which all persons may, to the extent of their capacity, play some part in the institutions of the national life, and thus develop and maintain due respect for lawfully constituted authority. And it goes on. I would really recommend a reading of the Constitution to my friends, and in particular the member for Laventille West. Because when we go to section 13, which is the maligned section, it says there, exceptions for certain legislation, 13.1. An act to which this section applies may expressly declare that it shall have effect even though inconsistent with sections 4 and 5, and if any such act does so declare, it shall have effect accordingly unless, milady, the act is shown not to be reasonably justified in a society that has a proper respect for the rights and freedoms of the individual. He referenced the authority of Surat. And I will stand here because the Privy Council have ruled in cases and then overturned themselves as we proceed. And the logic that was used in Surat, first of all, was obiter and wrong, and will be over time overruled by the Privy Council itself. And I will make that statement because I do not have the time, and I do not think this is the place, nor, and I think it will be wasted on some, to really go through the analysis of Surat and how that court came to its finding. That finding says, and that dicta says, and my friend said it here, that if there's a legitimate purpose and it's proportionate, then you could do it. That could not be more unconstitutional in Trinidad and Tobago than anything else. What that says is that there is no need in our constitution for an opposition. They wish that that was so. And they are now manipulating the process so that the constitution that was written by negotiations, as reminded by Caroni Central, when all of the peoples were represented in some form or fashion, and the constitution came out of that collective will as to how we will rule ourselves. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have a government that says, be rid of any opposition. Yes. This opposition, if my memory is correct, tells that there were 340,000 Trinidadians and Tobagonians who voted for the opposition. If we are to go the route that the learned Attorney General has sought, because not every possibility should be made a reality, it means then that you have disenfranchised a large proportion of the democratic population in this country. And then elections are a waste of time, effectively. Once you're in government, you are not accountable to anybody else other than yourself. And it is not surprising, because we've seen this rise of this aggression, that if they believe something is right, it must be. And whoever stands in their way should be ignored, castigated, buffed up.
Charged.
Well, we'll come to that in a while. I know my friends will suggest that I'm not being relevant, but nothing could be more relevant than the morass we've seen in relation to the Minister of Finance and the issues of the court's rulings in the property tax matters. If you have a government that doesn't respect the courts, and that's another debate about the respect for institutions and what is happening there, shameful as it is, but we must have that manifest responsibility that if a court rules, you do not try to manipulate yourself around it, to give falsehoods about what the court actually said. Because then if a government does not respect the courts, then the democracy is dead in Trinidad.
All conveniently.
So if it is convenient to you, it's good. But if it is not convenient to you, then it should be castigated. How could we rule ourselves and call ourselves mature? Because not everything in life is what we shall get. Not everything in life is what we should be pleased with. It's how we respond to these things and understand that not every day you're going to be right and not every day you're going to be wrong. And there is a line, and they keep talking about harmonization and harmony and everything else. What this does, this bill, and I want to ask, why is it? I can't remember any bill coming to the parliament as often as this one has. You do a little chirp today, a little chirp tomorrow. Next week, whenever there is a problem in the politics, Marriage Act comes before the Parliament. This is not about harmonization or constitutional strengthening and equality before everyone. This is about political destruction. Why in this week, and I have to go here because we need to confront these issues, in the week of Indian arrival, this matter is before the Parliament today. Because I wasn't in the country when it had happened, when it was introduced in a way that suggested that a large part of the Indian community, this is the reality, and I'm going to speak openly.
I'd like to hear the member for Shagona, St. Augustine. If it is that somebody wants to make an interjection, we're all familiar with the standing orders and do it in accordance with the standing orders. Please, member for St.
Thank you very much. Because nobody in this parliament could say that they supersede me in my intent to unify this country. And any action, however it is clothed, that does the opposite of that, that corrodes our social fabric, must be identified, put a light upon, and for those who are responsible, be made accountable for it. This thing is like a muleta. Do you know what a muleta is? You know matadors? The bullfighters? That red piece of cloth that infuriates the bull to become raging. This is one of many such muletas that we've seen in this parliament, brought here as a distraction to the real issues. Child marriages must be condemned. I have a daughter, and I know of no one who wants their child, particularly a daughter child, a girl child, to be married underage. Nobody I know. But we have now seen, literally, an explosion and infuriation that if a different point of view is held, it is castigated as religious based. That came out of the delivery of Laventille West. Or that it is a cultural, what shall I say, inferiority to ask for some acceptance for difference of opinion. And that is what it is. The members who have spoken already, many have already alluded to the fact that, and in particular the Hindu women's group, and I've heard from Caroni Central, from a Muslim group, that they ask for this, that in certain circumstances, that there'll be parental and judicial oversight for marriage. What is the big deal in condemning that? And out of the lips of some of my friends, they speak about maturity and call it about 30-odd biblical verses as to maturity. That's what at the end of it, it's all about. Whether you are mature enough to accept the responsibility for marriage. Because marriage is not just a word. It is a commitment. And I'm like one of those who understood that when I took an oath to be faithful to my wife, I intended to keep it. But I knew before I was age 41 when I got married, I couldn't. And therefore I chose not to be married. Now, I'm being very honest with you. I'm being very honest with you. And I was so grateful that I met the woman of my dreams, right? And I married her, and we are celebrating 14 years of marriage, because no matter what age you are, it is not a measure of your maturity. Maturity is really about your ability to understand that there are other points of view, to accept them, to work with them, to work it through, and to work it out. And therefore, by that measure, many on the other side should not be married, should not be in the parliament, because maturity is what is essential, not just to marriage, but for an important aspect of societal development. What is happening here, unfortunately, because of the political expediency, whether wittingly or unwittingly, it has created a divide. And the member for Laventille West had to be reminded that the amendments sought for the possibility of a 16-year-old marriage is not religious based. It is based on other conceptions that are not within the actual act itself, and that who will know a child better than the parents? Who will know the child better? And it is almost incongruous for us to be discussing marriage when others have made the point in derogatory ways, but it's real. There are so many children involved in sexual relations in schools, elementary schools. There are so many of our children who grow up without a father, grow up without a mother, or grow up without either mother or father. So children are being born in this society without parental control. But yet you want to limit those who want to marry and to create an institution and strengthen the very institution of marriage that is successful and is necessary for the success of any society. So we need to step back a little bit and add a little bit more thinking rather than talk. So, Madam Speaker, I've heard my friends reference India about marriage age 18 or 21 and other nations. It is really a fiction to believe that once you attain 18, that you're mature. It's a fiction. But because that we have developed other things that says 18 is the age of majority, you could vote, it's a convenient number. And it is nothing more than that. So the very biblical passages my friend referenced is completely in support of the indulgences, and I use that term, of the Hindu women's group and others, the Muslim groups, because they are saying, let's remove the artificiality. You may have a 16-year-old who is so mature and so ready, and we know these things, and sometimes they might find themselves a little bit more progressive physically, and there's a need for them now because they love each other and they want to be with each other for life. Why not give them that ability under law? Because in the eyes of God, where there is love, there's comity. Where there is love, there's possibility. But you have a law that we must respect, yes, but the sharp end of a law is not where we should be. The law must be able to accommodate as best as we can anything unless it is harmful. If it is harmful, well then the law must say this is a line we will not cross. And I really do not see why there is such incredible amount of debate for that small indulgence, a 2-year period. 16 to 18 is 2. What is the reality in Trinidad and Tobago? Are we ignoring all of those things and continuing the artificiality of the age 18 to divide the society? They say that we didn't do much. Let me tell you something, and the Attorney General, I know him, will answer truthfully. A lot of the work, a lot of the bills, in fact nearly all of them that have come from this government, work had already started on them. I, as Minister of Legal Affairs, received from the Hindu Women's Group their position. And we had started very quietly. Conversations, consultations. There were some groups that said under no circumstance they will have it. And there was work, Attorney General, within the Ministry of Legal Affairs. And you would have found it, I'm sure. If you can't find it, that's something is wrong. That would have dealt with an all-encompassing Marriages Act to do exactly what you're attempting to do. Work had already started on that. But we did not take the rushed approach to say, this is a red letter issue. Let us throw it into the fire and see if we could create more of an explosion. Because we needed to set an environment where when the law came, because it would have interfered constitutionally with people's right to privacy, which I understand the Attorney General doesn't truly believe. It is not an absolute right, we understand that. But it also affects your right to family life. It's an intrusion into your rights as a family to do things. It's an intrusion into the rights of young people 16 to do things. And therefore it requires a constitutional majority. And if it is that it was so when it first came, and you using strategy, because you do not believe the opposition will support, well then we are in a very, very dangerous place. Very, very dangerous place. Because what has happened in the society, and I have made the call already and I'm making it again today, where are all those voices? Where are today all those voices that were so protective of the Constitution and any effort by the People's Partnership to make change? Where are they today? not a word when a simple majority, a bare majority, could make fundamental change with oblivious disregard to the lawful opposition in a country. We are at a state of dictatorship in our parliament. And it behooves me to say, whilst the police are entitled to do their work, that it came in the papers today that a group of contractors had a matter before the court yesterday. I think it's important I'll pause until they're ready to hear this.
Careful with respect to that. Huh?
A matter before the court, but offices were raided on the very same day. What message are we sending?
Terrorism.
This is not the first time we've seen it in this country. We saw it already under P&M rule.
Yes.
And we're seeing it again. And if I had to read from the script is when they're in trouble politically. Right? They started they ringing bell long time about corruption. The next stage is harassment.
Madam Speaker, Standing Order 48-1, please.
So, member, I understand where you're going. I'm giving you a little latitude to come back to the substance of this matter.
And that's the point we're making. This is a pattern of conduct that if you take it one point and then look at another point, you will miss the entire picture. And before you know it, something has happened. And it is really too late for us to save this country. And that is why it is important for us, and I will continue to speak about this. And I know the Attorney General, I've known him for a long time. It is not his intention to destroy this country's democracy, but to say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And sometimes a little poison in that good intention, you don't even know it. You've been prodded to do things and you're not even sure why it happens, but it can happen here. And if we are not aware of the step-by-step move towards hell, then we'll end up there without knowing how we got there. And that is the simple point. That is the simple point. So I want to just bring it back now, where segments of the society not being properly consulted with, you could talk to somebody without consulting with them, because consultation don't mean just, right, well, you have to say, good, and I ignore you. Consultation is, okay, well, what about this point of view? Can we find some common ground that we could agree upon and then move this thing forward? My understanding is that never occurred. They were listened to and ignored. If you do that, then the entire democracy is at risk. Because it is necessary for us, if we talk about this constitution, the city constitution is for all of us. And it must give and take. It must have, my friends talk about certainty and everything else. But what is certain about the constitution is that it recognizes, as I read the preamble, that we are all entitled, whoever we are, whatever the color of our skin, whatever our religion is, whatever our economic background is, we are all Trinidadians and Tobagonians, and therefore under the protection of the Constitution. As profoundly put by the member of Caroni Central, we are all minorities religiously in this country. I don't think anybody has actually said that before. Maybe they did. But that's an important fact, because this is not a religious issue. If you take out the religion from it, take out the culture from it, this is a matter that affects the rights of every citizen to be protected in their beliefs. And it need not be religious, it need not be cultural, but it is a belief factor. And if people believe legitimately that there should be exceptions to any given law, they have a right for that to be expressed and for it to be dealt with. What many of us do not appreciate is that there are mischief makers amongst us who throw bait. And for those who are not wary, will go after that bait and create anger, animosity, and divide. I'll give you one example. That is very correct. I understand money had been distributed for Indian Arrival Day. The number was given, I think it's 300,000. I congratulate the minister for having done that. But within days you're hearing, and I'm saying this as a true patriot who loves all of our people, that 2 million is given for Eid. There are those in the society who are, whoa. How come that disparity? I hope it is not deliberate, but I cannot completely eliminate a deliberate act to show discrimination in the award of dispensation. And I'm warning those who may take bait from that to be very careful, because then you will be falling victim to the very plan of those mischief makers. A divided society is one that is very fragile. And if we want a future of this country, whatever difficulties we have today, we have to have hope that tomorrow is going to be better, and I'm sure it will be. Because people have started to change their attitude. Nothing changes without necessity. And some necessity has come, and the government has done the best that they could to take us through. And we are seeing, not by their manifestation, but other things that gives us some level of hope. But if we destroy the society in that process, because we want power, and this is across the board statement, what is it that you inherit?
To the bill, please.
Yeah. And permit me just to make this point, that if we say we love, even from a very limited point of view, our families and our children, if we create an environment of animosity, of criticism, discrimination, what we will leave for our children is a place that is not worth living in. And that, my friends, cannot be underscored enough. And that is why this marriage debate, as insignificant in terms of the numbers for child marriages, is so important, because it raises fundamental democratic and constitutional issues that my friends do not seem to wish to appreciate, but I do know they have the capacity to do it. And all I'm asking for, before I take my seat, is for us to take a very mature approach to the rights of everybody. You don't have to agree with everybody, but you have to respect their right to be heard on matters. So, Madam Speaker, with these few words, I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and to say that what my friends are engaged in are two very deadly and dangerous things that have been tried in our societies which have failed. That is, to create division, to destroy the Constitution in the process, and it is the Constitution that 1990, as my friend accepted, is a Constitution that saved this country. The rule of law still applies in Trinidad and Tobago. And we see institutions falling, and it was grievous what happened yesterday in another place. And as you look around, nearly every single thing is in a state of decay. But a friend of mine, I shouldn't call him a friend because I have so respect that he's much older than I, Mr. Ramdial sent me a message yesterday that as bad as things are, they will get better, and that things do not immediately change from bad to great. There's a transition period, and we're going through that. So a lot of the falsehoods and the false institutions and low men in high offices will have to account, and the people are saying you must account. In the old days, the PNM could do anything, or if another government...
Madam Speaker, Standing Order 48.1, please.
Yes. Please move on and come back to the bill. I think your point has been made, and sufficiently, and I've allowed you sufficient leeway. Please.
Yeah, I'm speaking about the opening of the democracy, where the expectations are that it is not no dog bark, not a damn dog bark or anything like that. And therefore, if we do not respect the wishes and the expectations of our population, they will have a disconnect from governance. And we've seen the consequence of that on our streets with the blood that has been let. I thank you very much.
Member for Tunapuna.
Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to enter the debate at this time. You know, it's good to enter the debate from this standpoint as being the Member of Parliament for the Tunapuna constituency. And I must say, you know, it's a marriage bill, and I've been hearing some of the members, like my last colleague there, St. Augustine, my neighbor in the Tunapuna constituency, you know, going all over the road, Madam Speaker. But it's a marriage bill. And simply to say, the purpose of the bill seeks to amend the following acts: the Marriage Act, Chapter 4501, the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act, Chapter 4502, the Hindu Marriage Act, Chapter 4503, the Orisha Marriage Act, Chapter 4504, and the Matrimonial Proceedings and Property Act, Chapter 4551. And we went all over the place since we started the debate, roughly around, minutes to 2. The bill also seeks to harmonize the aforementioned marriage statutes across the board by raising the legal age of marriage to 18 years, repealing any parental consent for a marriage, creating an offense where it is illegal to solemnize a marriage of a person who is under the age of 18 years, and extending the hours in which a marriage can be solemnized. The MP for St. Augustine, I was wondering, where he was heading when he made the statement that the marriage bill, came about and started 2 days after the Indian Arrival Day celebrations. But for the records, Madam Speaker, this bill first came to Parliament on March the 3rd, 2017. And if to correlate it, it started 2 days into the Lenten season. All right? 2 days into the Lenten season. And again, I'm only making reference to what the member for St. Augustine said. Right? I don't need to rebut. There's some things there's no need to rebut. I am here to make my presentation to show why I support the marriage bill. Added to that, the Lenten season started on March the 1st, 2017. And as I said, the second day, and we are still into Lenten season. I think we have about 2 more days before we end the Lenten season. And added to that, the first week of Ramadan was also earlier this week. So again, if we want to look at the page or the direction that the member for St. Augustine, we in Lenten season, we at Indian Arrival Day, we also into Ramadan. All three. So again, I say no more and I leave it just there. Marriage is still honorable, Madam Speaker, and it is part of ensuring that the moral fabric of our society is maintained. Right? We need to ensure that marriage leads to families. Families need to ensure that the society will be well taken care of, and then our society of Trinidad and Tobago will be on a good footing. The member for, honorable member for Laventille West, spoke about, 2 scriptures. He quoted from Genesis, he quoted from Ephesians. But today in my discourse, I really want to look at it from a biblical point of view. Right? From a biblical point of view at what the Bible says about marriage. Many of us quote scriptures in this August chamber, but today I really want us to go through a discourse and pay attention, listen well. I know it's not Sunday morning or it's a midweek service, but I really would like you all to listen to my discourse today as with regards to marriage. Yeah, once it really is, it's with the bill. It's with the bill. And at times, Madam Speaker, based on Standing Order 4410, I would like to also get permission to read my discourse. But before I get there, I'd just like to quote from 1 or 2 quotations, from the newspaper. Express Monday, 16 January 2017, where Ms. Shireen Kalu, learned gynecologist, spoke about time to abolish the Marriage Act. Dr. Shireen Kalu, thank you. Right, Express Monday, 16 January 2017, and I quote, "People who are calling the government to deal with teenage sexual promiscuity before tackling the issue of child marriage ought to hang their heads in shame. For the first time in the history of the country, efforts are being made, in the first time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, efforts are being made to amend the Archaic Marriage Act, under which Hindu, Muslim, or Risha marriage are allowed to be performed in Trinidad and Tobago. And she goes on and she talks about, the positives with regards to that situation. There's another editorial, again Monday 16 January 2017 in the Express. Child marriage is an abomination, and it's from Mr. Jonathan Bagu. And he also spoke about the Christian Youth Foundation condemns the practices of child marriage within Trinidad and Tobago. It is immoral and contrary to the rights as esteemed in the 1976 Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. And then again he goes on in the discourse to speak about all the things. My learned colleague from Caroni Central would have also mentioned about the network of non-governmental organizations, and they also support the learned Attorney General with regards to the proposed change for the laws against marriage in Trinidad and Tobago. And the headline goes, NNGO, Trinidad and Tobago laws must protect our children, and it's from the Guardian of Thursday, March 2nd, 2017. It also quotes with regards to the member for Tewarie, actually back in 1997, when Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisesa, as Attorney General, formed the first Marriage Act Review Committee. I don't know if you remember, could we call, back then? So again, we are here now in 2017. Madam Speaker, we must save our children. We live in an era where many girls, including infants, minors under 18 years of age, and teenagers are being sexually abused, raped, and even molested at times. Not only are these activities a violation of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, but is also a clear violation of God's law according to the Bible. And we can go to Leviticus 19:29, which says that parents shouldn't permit their daughter to participate in prostitution, since it would cause the nation to become profane, polluted, and immoral. Proverbs 14:34 goes on to say that righteousness will exalt a nation, but sins causes a people to be disgraced. If we fail to abide by God's holy standard, our beloved nation would suffer reproach. However, if we as a people choose to be upright and right standing with the Creator, we could be elevated. Madam Speaker, while having sexual intercourse with minors, children under the age of 18 years remains illegal. There are those in our land who would like to have this legalized by simply permitting fully grown men to marry minors. We need to be careful that we don't pass laws that are contrary to God's laws. The nation of Trinidad and Tobago is founded under the principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God. And again, all races, all religions can find an equal place in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's now examine carefully what does the Holy Bible say on the subject of child marriages, and what is the view on this matter. Marriage was the first institution created by God, and again, as my colleague quoted from Genesis 2:24, marriage is also honorable and holy. But should a child be allowed to marry? And I think that's the question that we all need answered here today. Shall a child be allowed to marry? Is a minor or preteen mature enough to commit herself to this sacred institution? Marriage is a sacred institution, Madam Speaker. And again, no child should be entering into something which they have no clue, no idea about. Under age 18, definitely. Thank you, Member for Tewarie. Madam Speaker, well, let's see what the Bible says about childhood. The Old Testament, Prophet Zechariah foresees the streets filled of little girls and boys playing. That's what children do. Children play. You know what I mean? Marriage is not about playing, right? Marriage is not about playing. This of course, is what children do. They play and have fun. King Solomon writes in Ecclesiastes 11:19 that childhood is a time for enjoyment, happiness, and fun, while preparing oneself for the demands of adulthood in the future. That's what a child does. You're going through your stages, you're having fun, you're happy, but you're preparing yourself for that adulthood. And again, as enshrined in our laws, which is 18 years of age, that's the year you can vote and everything. Right? So again, let's prepare them. Both Zechariah and King Solomon appear to be in full support of children being allowed to be children and not forced into adulthood before time. Let girls continue to be girls. You know that statement? We use that statement, let girls continue to be girls and let boys continue to be boys. Let's not deprive them of their childhood, Madam Speaker. Let's not rush them into the realities of the responsibilities of being an adult. I remember distinctly, at age, 24, I had my girlfriend, wanted to be married and so on. And when I went to my mom, she told me categorically that I was not ready at age 24. I had to hold on 2 years. 2 years at age 26 in order to marry. I am saying I am 28 years happily married. Happily married at age 26. You know what I mean? So again, so picture a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old coming to the mother, or my daughter my second daughter who now turned 18, and saying, Daddy, I'm ready to get married. Oh man, come on. How much of us in here would really like our daughters to be married at age 16, at age 17? That's the age you're getting ready to go on from advanced levels in order to go to university, to go on to some higher form of education. How could she come and say she wants to get married at this age? And that's the question. So our learned Attorney General is bringing the law before us and saying, listen, let's bring all the various laws together and bring it under one governing body. One governing body. You know what I mean? And I give him all the praise for doing that today. The Apostle Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 13:11 that when he was a child, he understood and taught as a child. But when he became an adult, he stopped all childish things. Marriage requires maturity, childlessness, not immaturity, but adulthood. The Apostle Paul teaches us also in 1 Corinthians 7:26 that if one chooses to get married, that they should face many troubles, stress, and pressure. That's the bad side of marriage. There is pressure, there is stress that goes with it. But there's also the good things that goes with marriage. The love, the happiness, the affection, the passionate, the tolerant. The same trend now that we asking now that we want them to marry before age 18. Madam Speaker, marriage is not always a bed of roses. We know that. I don't think anyone would disagree with Apostle Paul, especially if we have already been married. Marriage involves making sacrifices, compromise, distress, emotional disturbances at times, disappointment, worry, hurt, anxiety, patience, love, and the list can go on. Many of us in this room, of the 41 of us, could add additional individuals here, because again, each one of our marriages would be differently. This is exactly what Apostle Paul meant when he said that marriage is trouble, marriage is complex, and it's for this reason it is only for the mature. Marriage is only for the mature, Madam Speaker. Can a minor or a child deal with this amount of pressure? Do they possess the necessary psychological capacity to handle this amount of mental toughness, mental trauma? Are they emotionally prepared for this, Madam Speaker? There are adults who are not able to cope with the rigors of marriage. Yes, there are some adults that are not able to cope with the rigors of marriage. Far less a minor, far less a child under age 18 years of age. Therefore, we cannot trust minors with the awesome responsibility of raising families. Ecclesiastes again says, woe to the nation whose ruler is a child. Can a child rule a nation? Can a child rule a nation? A child is much too naive and immature to govern a nation. Family is the bedrock of society. Remember for Rupuch East? You hear that? You hear that, Madam? Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Family is the bedrock of our society, as I said earlier. It's the fabric of any nation. To be thrown into the important role of marriage is too much for a child to bear. Titus, we go to Titus now, Titus 2:4, teaches us that young women must be taught to be sober and disciplined. That's one of the things. 2 girls I have, 2 girls. sober, and disciplined. You know, they say young ladies must not be heard, you know, they must be seen. Modesty. Those are the things. Those things are not achieved prior to age 18, as we continue along, Madam Chairman. It also says that they need to be trained to be loved and be subjected to their husbands. It is also necessary, Madam Speaker, according to this verse, that they need to be trained how.
Every member who has not yet joined the debate would be entitled to join the debate in a manner and practice that we recognize. In the meantime, Member for Tunapuna has my ear. Please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Right? In marriage, you need to be trained to manage a home. This means to be a wife, training is needed. Being a wife is not for the unskilled. It's not for the novices or the immature or for a child under age 18 years of age. To be a wife requires training. It's a skill that needs to be acquired over time. It wouldn't come overnight, over time. Being a wife isn't about having sex, Madam Speaker. It's more than being good in bed. It's more than being good in bed. And you know, I mean, I don't want to think that, you know, that has been the logic throughout the years, you know, in having these youth, you know, in their virginity, young as they are, sexy as they may look, you know what I mean? Beautiful as they may be.
Okay? Yes, please.
Thank you for bringing me back on track, Madam Speaker. A wife is also the keeper of a house. She must be domestically inclined. She must also be economically.
Excuse me, please, members. The decorum. And again, I advise the members who sit at the lower half of the house, for some reason, the microphones pick you all up more than everybody else. Please. I'm sure anybody else will respond. Tunapuna.
Yeah. And Madam Speaker, again, it's also gender related. Both male and female. Men and women. All right? It's just that, you know, in terms of the context of the bill, you know, we are really referring to the female part of it. But again, both male and female, again, must be economically inclined, domestically inclined, likewise. A wife today is also a breadwinner, right? Many wives today are breadwinners within the family. She must learn how to love her husband. Likewise, the husband must know how to like or love his wife. To be affectionate, to have fondness, to show benevolence and kindness. And again, both husband and wife as we go along. This requires training or teaching according to Titus 2, verses 4 and verse 5. Madam Speaker, there is an obvious contrast between wise women and foolish women as quoted in Proverbs 14:1, which shows what a wife must possess in order to build her home. This means she must have prudence, intelligence, knowledge in order for her to govern the affairs of her household, to manage the finances, arrange meals, to take care of her children, to work, etc. She's able to teach her children, be a blessing to her family, provides comfort and discipline. And as I said earlier, it's both gender related, from both sides of it. The men are also allowed to do the same thing. Provides comfort and discipline. Immature, inexperienced, naive little girls lack the understanding, the knowledge to effectively build a home through no fault of theirs. Because of immaturity, her estate would come to ruin. Her lack of understanding will result in poor management. They don't have the tact or the know-how when it comes to build a home once you are under age 18 years of age. That's not their style. That's not what they have been prepared for. That's not what the grounding that they have gotten throughout at those ages. It comes over a period of time, Madam Speaker. According to Proverbs 24:3 and 4, a home is built by having wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. A child should be allowed to mature into the person who will be that woman of wisdom who would be able to build her home. Child marriages have placed an individual who is still developing in a position for which they are not yet prepared. They are literally being forced to function in a post for which they haven't yet acquired the skills or maturity for. Madam Speaker, King Solomon, one of the wisest men, makes mention of the type or quality of wife a man should pursue or desire to marry. Proverbs 12 verse 4 tells us about a noble wife, a lady of strong character, a lady of strong character, worthy of respect, worthy of honor. Yes, there may be young people that may have good characters under 18, they may have honor, they may have respect, but we're talking about at that stage of the game where they are going into a marriage, where they have to start a family, where they have to ensure that the home is secured, where they may be able to, even have to go out to be a breadwinner, as most women are today in our society. A lady, a woman of virtue and excellence, and she must also bring joy to her husband. This type of virtue and character does not grow overnight. Members, it does not happen overnight. These qualities must be groomed and allowed to develop over a period of time. It cannot be rushed. There is a process by which children are raised, nurtured, groomed, and trained to become mature, responsible adults where character, virtues, and responsibilities are developed. There is no shortcut to maturity and adulthood. There is no shortcut. They must go through the period in order to get to adulthood and maturity. More harm is done, Madam Speaker, by hurriedly casting children into marriage territory where they are not ready for. Where they are not ready for. Proverbs 31 provides a detailed description of the perfect wife. This account of the virtuous woman is the benchmark by which a good wife is measured. It's the standard which a bride should aspire to be. A close look and inspection of this passage of scripture would reveal that the personality being described is not a child. Madam Speaker, Proverbs 31:10, a wife is noble. Character or a virtuous woman is precious and valuable. The same thing goes for a man. The same thing goes for a man. Verse 11, a good wife is trusted by her husband. Members, listen carefully. A good wife is trusted by her husband. He has full confidence in her. He could afford to turn his back knowing she would not disappoint him. His mind is at rest. You want to know that when you leave the house one morning, she's at rest. Madam Speaker. All right, okay. My colleagues telling me the same thing goes for a man. The same thing goes for a man. But remember, I want to stay close to what the bill is, members. I want to stay close to what the bill is with regards to, again, legalizing the age limit for 18-year-old female. But the same thing can be said for males. Member for Tobago East? The same thing can be good for the males. He could afford to turn him. His mind is at rest. She does not have to be supervised or policed. A 16-year-old need to be supervised. You still need to hold their hand. Sometimes my 18-year-old, when I cross in the road with her, sometimes I hold her hand to cross the road still. Even my wife, I still hold her hand to cross the road at times. So far less for a 16-year-old or 17-year-old. I might have to lift up. Imagine as a husband, you're lifting up your wife to cross the road. Let's get back to the meat of it. Clearly, this is not the qualities to be shown of a child under 18 years of age. Children must be supervised. We go to verses 13 and 14 of same Proverbs 31. She is industrious, has business sense, and can manage money. she is also educated. She is also educated. Verse 15, she knows how to manage her time. She is also responsible. Also responsible. Verse 16, she is able to estimate the worth of a purchase. She knows a good bargain. A 16-year-old knows a good bargain. A 16-year-old could make a good purchase rather than to go and buy lollipop, apples. You know what I mean? You never can tell. She needs to know a good purchase. The verse says she considers a field before she buys it. This means she is able to think things through. She plans. She gives careful thought to whatever endeavor she undertakes. She is tactical. She is strategic. And again, Madam Speaker, the same thing can be said for the man, for the husband, or for the male, however we want to categorize it. But again, I want to say clearly on what the bill is before us. I don't want the Speaker to have to say, you know what I mean, get back on track. Verse 17, Madam Speaker, she's full of energy and vigor. Verse 18, again she demonstrates a business sense. Verse 20, she's charitable. Verses 21 and 22 of the same Proverbs 10, she ensures that her family is well clothed, protected from harms and danger. Likewise, the husband can do the same. The male individual can do the same. Verse 23, Madam Speaker, the quality of man she marries also speaks volumes of her own character. She must be able to make a wise choice. She must be able to make a wise choice. And I sure many of us, being married for a number of years, I heard my colleague from St. Augustine talking about the number of years you have been married, and you must be satisfied. 14, you made a wise choice. This virtuous woman or lady would not settle for any man. She wants a husband worthy of respect and honor. She wouldn't be interested in any type of man, nor a man interested in little girls under age 18. Verse 23 of Proverbs 10. The reverse can also be true. A man of noble character and virtue. Right? We wanted to hear about the man all the time. A man of noble character and virtue. One who is conspicuous. One who is highly esteemed. A wife wants to know that she has a man of good standings.
That's right.
He would choose a lady with these very attributes. He would not marry a little girl or someone who is childish, naive, or immature. He wants a wife who is compatible with him. And I trust we all would want a wife that is compatible with us. He needs someone who is mature and responsible. Therefore, those who have an interest in minors, children under the age of 18 years of age, one would have to question the sense of dignity, responsibility, integrity, and maturity. These men lack character, Madam Speaker. They are desperately in need of the code of ethics, morality, and integrity. Verse 25. She has vision and foresight. Same thing can be said for women. Vision and foresight. She's confident about the future. She can afford to rejoice and be happy because she has fortified herself and her family beforehand against life uncertainties. Again, she needs to plan about the life uncertainties. What's happening next 5 years, next 10 years. She herself may need some sort of education, but yet still she may have to plan with regard to the education of her siblings. Can this be said of a minor? A child under age 18 years? Verse 26, Madam Speaker. She speaks words of wisdom. She is sensible and thoughtful in her choice of words. She provides instructions to those in need. She gives good advice. She encourages. She edifies. She strengthens with her words. Likewise, the male party can do the same. Right? We are not being gender biased in this situation. She's intelligent. She's a counselor, a motivator, and a teacher. Can a child under age 18 provide these characteristics? Can a child under 18 do these things? These are the questions that need to be answered. Verse 27. She manages the affairs of the household
Member for
along with her
Tunapuna,
husband.
your original 30 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes. If you intend to avail yourself of it, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I will so oblige. Yes. She manages the affairs of her household. Likewise, the husband will manage the affairs of the household. They both don't have time to be idle, both the male and the female. Verse 28, she successfully raises her children who appreciate all her labors and efforts. Raises her children. Can a 16-year-old raise a child? Yes, it's happening in the world, but still, this side sees the need in order to make the necessary legal adjustments in order to ensure and avoid and to minimize not much of that happens within our society. Madam Speaker, I ask you today, how can children raise children? How can children raise children? She's a blessing to her husband as well. Verse 29 of Proverbs 10, she is royal, a lady of high moral standards, noble character, excellence, and what we would call a gem. Most of us have a gem. Most males have a gem. Most females have a gem. Right? Most of us have a gem inside this world. Verse 29. This is the type of woman every man should desire to marry. Not minors. Not minors. Not under age 18 years of age. Not preteens. Not preteens. Should I marry somebody who could be my daughter? Should I marry somebody who I have to take care, babysit? Not little girls, not the immature, not children who don't have a clue about the clue of how to go about life. Verse 30 of Proverbs 10. A famous Jamaican dancehall artist once sang about having a pretty face, but bad character. Beauty don't last forever. It can be ruined by a single mishap, an accident, or an unfortunate situation. It can fade away gradually with age, but character is permanent, long-lasting, and forever. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We all have our very choices. Madam Speaker, yes, young girls may be pretty, may be attractive, or even sexy, but do they possess the character, the fortitude, or grace to be a wife? The smooth face can and will become wrinkled, but maturity is enduring and long-lasting. Madam Speaker, maturity is long-lasting. Madam Speaker, today I beseech us to please allow our minors, our preteens, our teenagers, girls under age 18 years to develop character, respect, honor, virtue, health, and of course, an education. We want the type of wife who wins the approval of not just her husband, but we want a wife that will be able to get the approval of her husband, of her children, her family, the community, her nation, and also of God. Madam Speaker, today I wholeheartedly endorse this marriage bill as laid in this Parliament by the Honorable Attorney General, the Miscellaneous Provisions Marriage Act 2016, and it's duly endorsed and approved, and in this chamber today I endorse it fully. Thanks for the opportunity.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute on this bill. And Madam Speaker, I must make reference to the Member of Parliament for Tunapuna and say I was extremely flabbergasted by his contribution, and really I wondered if he was still living in the 1930s when he spoke about the role of the woman and the wife. And Madam Speaker, we have been trying to move away from the religious arguments with respect to this bill, but yet still we have the member of Tunapuna quoting from the Bible on this bill. And this bill is not about any one religion. We are in a secular, we exist in a secular country, and therefore this piece of legislation is for all of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, to quote from a religious text about the virtues of a woman and a wife, let's leave that for the church, please. Let's leave that for the religious institutions. And really get to the bill. Madam Speaker, I have had the opportunity to listen to my colleagues on both sides on this bill, and everyone has brought to the forefront, with the exception of the Member of Parliament for Tunapuna, valid arguments and points. Madam Speaker, I want to begin by saying, first and foremost, and by quoting from a report from the United Nations Population Fund, child marriage is a human rights violation. Despite laws against it, the practice remains widespread, in part because of persistent poverty and gender inequality. In developing countries, Madam Speaker, 1 in every 3 girls is married before reaching the age of 18, and 1 in 9 is married under the age of 15. Madam Speaker, child marriage threatens girls' lives and health, and it limits their future prospects. Girls pressed into child marriage often become pregnant while still adolescents, increasing the risk of complications in pregnancy or childbirth. These complications are a leading cause of death among older adolescents in developing countries. Now, with regards to the reality of our situation here in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker, as an MP, I have had many parents over my stint for the past 6 years as an MP come to my office to ask for assistance because their teenage daughter is now pregnant, and because of culture, religion, and other factors, they are at a loss as to what to do. Do they marry? Do they abort? Other issues to consider, and you know, this is why the Attorney General needs to respond to these issues, because we live in a society where there are many gray areas. It's not cut and dried. So for the member for Laventille West to say, well, yes, we acknowledge what the network of NGOs and the Hindu Women's Organization is trying to say with respect to asking for a clause, with the 16 to 18 clause, we can't ignore that, Madam Speaker. There are gray areas, and the reality of the situation on the ground with our young people is that it does exist in today's society, where we have girls under the age of 18 becoming pregnant, where we have the scenario where we have also girls under the age of 18 meeting someone close to their age and falling in love. I mean, it's not something that we have to throw out of this discussion. And therefore, yes, and exactly. So we make reference to the Romeo Clause, and this is what the Hindu Women's Organization and the network of NGOs are asking for consideration for these clauses to be considered. Exactly, and I also understand the Muslims Women Organization has also asked for consideration to their issues. And Madam Speaker, we cannot be cut and dried as Laventille West suggested earlier on. As I said before, there are gray areas and it needs to be considered, and therefore I will ask the Attorney General to look at these considerations and to listen to what the ground is saying. Listen to the reality of the situation is, and have proper and due consideration given, and even in the absence of putting in legislation, at least try to create an enabling environment that would allow for these situations to be dealt with in a positive manner. Now, Madam Speaker, the reality again, as I go back to, there are issues that we cannot ignore as a society and as a parliament. How do we deal with the thousands of teenage pregnancies annually? How do we deal with that? What comes after? Would the AG bring legislation to legalize abortion after this? What comes after? Because this is the reality. Or will we introduce a policy in high schools to distribute condoms? Are we going to have a more intense and avid sex education program in high schools? Because everybody's on social media. We see what is going on with high school bullying. We see what is going on with relationships in high school. We're seeing the videos, it's there. So are we going to embark upon a more intense and aggressive campaign to deal with these realities that exist? We cannot ignore them. There are also questions, Madam Speaker, which needs to be asked in creating the enabling environment. Because making good law alone and legislating to protect the rights of the child does not save our children here. Legislation alone will not save our children. We have issues also of same-sex relationships. Is it that after, as we move ahead to transform society into a modern one, is it that we are going to now bring legislation for same-sex marriages? Is this something that we have to look forward to? And these are the questions that the Attorney General needs to answer and to also take into consideration, because society is transforming rapidly as we speak. And, Madam Speaker? Yeah. So we really need to take into consideration these things, and education policy at the high school level, even at primary schools, because I would refer to some cases later on where we have our primary school girls getting pregnant, and therefore we need a very intense and avid sex education program in our high schools. Now, in addition to that, Madam Speaker, the former People's Partnership government embarked on a series of projects under the ministry.
Member for Couva North. Members, it is now 4:30. We shall take the suspension now. We will resume at 5 p.m.